Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. Normally I go for a portrait view of the poster rather than like a landscape, like horizontal one, which I was going to do, but the vertical ones, they were like kind of blurry and not really good quality, so I went with this one instead because I want to make sure at least the titles are readable, in the thumbnail and such. Anyway, so Mike and Nick and Alice, which is kind of a really fun title to say. It's a action movie. It's an action movie that didn't really have much action. That's the thing I was disappointed with, actually. Movie that I watched on Hulu, and I watched the trailer and I read the little blurb, and I thought this was gonna be like a comedy action movie, because that's at least what the trailer made it look like. And the description, I'm just like kind of paraphrasing this, was something of like, oh, in this comedic R-rated whatever movie that made it sound like it was going to be really cool. And it's a movie about these gangsters, and also about time travel for some reason. Somehow somebody invents time travel in this universe. Other than that, everything's like pretty normal. I thought it was going to be like action packed and funny and very like fast paced. I will give it this, it was kind of funny. I did write down some things I thought were funny, so it kept that end of the bargain. But action wise, like I said, for a movie with like these gangsters and everybody has like a gun and stuff, there wasn't really a lot of action. Like someone gets shot at the beginning, but it's not in like an action sequence or anything. Because this is a time travel movie, there's like flashbacks to things. I feel like I'm like very picky when it comes to movies that have anything to do with like time travel or like multiple versions of the same person, which happens in this one. That's why it's called Mike and Nick and Alice, because there's two people named Nick and one of them is from the future. Because I feel like if you don't do it right, it can get like kind of confusing, because then you have to like explain shit about the time travel, which is really funny for me saying this as someone that's like a Doctor Who fan. It's like one of my favorite shows, and that one is entirely about time travel. But I with that one, I like try not to think about it too hard, to be honest. This one, it doesn't get like too confusing. It's more so like flashbacks of like characters meet, like actual flashbacks, and not all of them are like time travel related flashbacks, which I was okay with. But it goes the route of like flashbacks where it's revealing that people were like 2 steps ahead for not time travel related reasons. And the amount of little like surprises or kind of plot twists, I was kind of like, Anyway, let me get into just kind of my... Wait, no, I should probably explain what the plot of this is, and then I'll get into my notes. So, Vince Vaughn's character, he's named Nick. That's why there's 2 people named Nick. And the other guy, I always forget his name. And he's been in like a ton of movies. He's in like the Sonic movie. I always think of him as the guy from Hop, because there's all this, whenever there's pictures of like the CGI character in the road trip movie in the car, and there's like the human that's kind of dragged along with them, it's always this guy for some reason. He's in like 4 of those kind of movies. But yeah, he's Mike, and he's a gangster, but he wants to get out of it, and he wants to have a normal life. But him and Mike and Nick are coworkers, and then Alice is Mike's they're together. I guess they're dating his girlfriend, but she's actually Nick's husband, but they're not really like romantically involved anymore. It's kind of weird. She's a cool character though. I like Alice. But yeah, it's like it's one of those where it's like there's a person who's in a dangerous field, like a gangster or a hitman or whatever, and it's like they want to call it quits. They want to just have like a normal life with their loved one or whatever, but it's like they got to do this like one last job. It's one of those kind of movies, which I thought was fine, and I like that Alice is just as much involved as Nick, not in terms of like why there's the danger or anything, but she ends up becoming involved and part of the team, and I liked that. And then the thing with Nick and why there's two Nicks is that it's basically they're like part of an organization or something. Alice isn't, but like the two guys are, and there's someone who's said to be a rat, and I don't even remember why, but Nick ends up saying it's Mike, like setting him up, and it's not Mike, and that gets Mike killed. And Nick, I guess, it feels really, really bad about it. So there's some other guy that has a time machine. I don't know why there's a guy that invents a time machine in this. That they don't have like futuristic technology. I guess he's just like really smart or whatever. And Nick somehow knows about this time machine and uses it. And now there's two Nicks. And the Nick from the future knows that Mike is going to die and has like lived through that entire specific night already. So he's coming back to the present to save Nick's, to save Mike's life. I don't know why I kept getting their names confused. Even in my notes, I kept getting them confused, and I'm like, wait, I have to retype it. But yeah, that's pretty much the plot of it. I'll go over like my notes. I liked that this movie started off with the Billy Joel song. That's always a plus for me because I could say Billy Joel's my favorite musician. I don't even really have to think about it. I like that it's specifically the song "Why Should I Worry," because I have never heard that song used in a movie besides the Disney movie Oliver and Company, which I think that's what it was written for anyway, if I remember right. I'm gonna have to like double check that. But yeah, I like that the movie just starts off with this guy singing along to the song. That's pretty fun. And then he gets shot, and I was bummed. Like, we didn't really know anything about the character at that point other than he's singing through the song, but he seemed like a cool dude, so I was bummed about that. And the sad thing is, you find out later on in the movie he got killed in an accident. Like, someone who's in this like smoke and whatever ends up shooting this guy in the head. That's like how the movie starts, and you find out later that it was completely on accident, and this character didn't need to if anything, it ends up creating problems that the specific character dies because it's the guy that invents the time machine. Like, the movie tries to cover its basis of like, okay, why can't we use the time machine again if we screw up something within the night? So it's like there's all these explanations of like the guy that invents the time machine is dead, and the time machine in that scene ends up getting destroyed, and so does all of the notes. They're like, yeah, no, the time machine is not an option anymore. Put that out of your mind, which is really funny when you think about with some stuff with the ending. The ending actually kind of bothered me a little bit, which I'm gonna be like spoiling that and stuff, like I always do, but I thought I'd mention that. There's a character, his name is Jimmy Boy. He's the son of this like crime boss or whatever. He ends up in jail. That's like has to do with the plot. And at the beginning of the movie, he gets out of jail. He has a cake and it has a little 6 candle on it. I was confused by that at first because when you go to that scene, it's just showing a close-up of a cake with the 6 on it, and I'm like, okay, we're at a 6-year-old's birthday party. No, it's a guy that's getting out of jail. And then they show a close-up of the cake, and I thought the cake looked really funny because it just says, I spent 6 lousy years in prison, and all I got was this lousy fucking cake. It's the same way as, like, those t-shirts, those, like, really specific t-shirts when you go on vacation, and then it has, like, a little, like, cartoon doodle of, like, a guy in prison or something. I thought that was a pretty funny cake. Because now this is making me think, because at the time I'm recording this, it's like a month until my birthday, and now I'm thinking, dang, that would be really funny for me to have something written like that. Not the prison thing. I've never been to prison, but I turned however years old I am, and all I got was this cake. But then again, it's like I live with my parents, and I might have like a family party, so that would be kind of weird. If it was just with friends, though, I would, like, totally do something like that. I've always wanted, like, a really stupid birthday cake. Oh, yeah, comment just in general, not really with the movie. I never realized that, like yeah, I know people age, duh, but like Vince Vaughn looks so old now. Like the other thing too is I'm so used to seeing him in comedies. Like I used to watch him a lot in movies, in like the early 2000s, where sometimes he was like the main character, and he'd sometimes play like a normal guy. Like the movie I'm thinking about in my head as I'm saying this is specifically the movie Dodgeball, because I just watched that like last month, where he plays like the straight guy in a group of like a bunch of weirdos and stuff as his dodgeball team. You know, I keep mentioning this movie in my reviews. I think I'm gonna have to rewatch it at some point and just to do a review of it. It's such a fun movie. But yeah, I'm used to him in comedies, and here he's like a really serious guy and actually a little bit scary, so that was new for me. But also he looks, I don't know how old he is, let me just say that, but he looks like a lot older, like more wrinkly and stuff than how I'm used to. You know, it's not the early 2000s anymore, that it like kind of threw me off. Like I recognized his face and stuff, but yeah, it kind of threw me off. So my main thing with this movie is, you know, it's supposed to be an action movie. There's not really a lot of action happening, which is a bummer, because like the fight scenes are cool. The one thing that does ruin them is sometimes there's like random slow-mo, and it looks weird. I didn't like it, but the fight scenes in this are cool. Like there's this part in the trailer which is one of like the coolest scenes in the movie, so I was bummed that it was in the trailer, and was making me think it was going to be funny too, which I mean it was funny, but like not as funny as I thought it was going to be. But I was okay with the humor in this. It's fine. Where it's like they go to, it's when future Nick is revealed and Mike has to use chloroform on a rag, you know, like they do in movies and stuff, and him and present Nick get into an argument about it. That's kind of funny. And then they have to fight each other, future Nick and Mike, I mean, and their fight's pretty good. And then that's it. That's like the one, I think like the one fight scene for like the first hour or so of the movie. Like there's like a shootout at the end, and that was pretty cool, and you get some like action there, but there's really not a lot. Actually, a lot of this movie is just talking, and on one hand that is where a lot of the funny lines come from, but there's like a lot of scenes where it's just the four characters talking. I mean some of it is them like planning, you know, what they're gonna do to save Mike's life, so I get that, that's important, but a lot of it is just kind of like random whatever, and I was like, okay, can we get to like cool stuff with guns now? There's also a lot of references to movies and TV shows, but it's like ones I wasn't really expecting. Like there's a part when the like crime boss guy or whatever, I think his name is Sosa, and he's talking, I think, to his son or to somebody, and oh yeah, I really like Sosa as a character, by the way. He has a son, and his son is named Johnny Boy, and he's kind of the person like why the story is happening, basically, where it's like, yeah, Sosa, I wrote Sosa in my notes, it might be Soma, I think it's Sosa. It's like, yeah, he runs like this crime organization or whatever, but he's also genuinely like a really good dad and cares a lot about his son. I really liked that as part of his character. But anyway, there's like a part when they're talking, and I think it's the two of them, or it might be Johnny Boy and some other character. I don't remember. It's like Johnny Boy talking to somebody, and they're talking about Winnie the Pooh, and one person in the conversation is like, who's Winnie the Pooh? And the other character is like, it's Winnie the Pooh, he's a cartoon, he's in the Tigger movie. Like I feel like out of all of the examples to give about Winnie the Pooh, my first like thought with that would not be to bring up the Tigger movie. I want to clarify, I have not seen the Tigger movie. Maybe it's really good, maybe it's the standout of the Winnie the Pooh series, but that would not be what I would give as like a first example to remind someone of Winnie the Pooh. I mean, if it was me, I would say there's a Winnie the Pooh movie that's from the 70s. I'd end up using like that as an example. I feel like the Tigger movie would probably be lesser known to the general public in terms of Winnie the Pooh Media. And now I feel like I'm gonna have to watch the Tigger movie. I'm gonna have to look into it. Anyway, so they talk about that. There's a part where they talk about Ratatouille. It does have to do with the what's going on in the plot though, because they're trying to mention about who's the rat, as in like the person who's the betrayer and stuff, the imposter, if you will. And someone says the only rat I like is the one in Ratatouille or something like that. Ratatouille's a movie I've seen though. That one's pretty good. And then there's a section of the movie where the four main characters are just talking about Gilmore Girls for some reason. I don't think it had to do with the plot. They just legitimately spend like 5 minutes talking about, sitting in a circle talking about Gilmore Girls. And I was just like, oh, okay. I mean, it doesn't help that I've never seen Gilmore Girls, so I don't know anything about the characters and stuff. But yeah. The part when they showed the time machine, that was pretty cool. It's like a section that's in, well, whenever there's flashbacks, it's in black and white, but like the first time you see anything in black and white in this movie, it's when they do the time travel thing, and the time travel machine even has like a little screen and whatever. I thought that part of the movie is pretty cool. It's like a very short scene. I like that Alice doesn't freak out about time travel being real. She's just like on board immediately. Actually, not really many of the characters are curious or concerned or freaked out or anything about the existence of time travel in it. This is not a movie that takes place in the future. Time travel does not exist in this movie except for like the guy that invented time travel. That's pretty much it. Like even at the end of the movie, when the bad guys they see that there's two Nicks, no one questions it or asks about that. Like the only character that's like, what the heck, time travel is real, why is there two Nicks, is Mike, and that's it. But it is kind of treated as a joke in the movie that Mike has pretty normal reactions to things that I feel like an average person would, and everyone else is just like, oh yeah, time travel, whatever. And that's funny to me, but also weird. Or there's this other thing where like Mike and Alice, they've been seeing each other. Well, Alice is also pregnant, but that's something revealed by one of the future Nicks. And apparently like Nick knew, and Mike had been trying to hide it throughout like the entire movie, or most of the movie, I should say. I actually thought with this that like future Nick was going to end up being a villain, but he ends up joining the team. But then it does start to follow whatever the events of the original timeline is, and then or no, wait, maybe past Nick past Nick I thought was going to be a villain, but then future Nick, there's like this whole scenario that was actually kind of cool, where there's this like cannibal guy who's supposed to kill Mike, and they hire an actor to play the cannibal, like in universe I mean, and it's just this whole thing where it's like it's following the present timeline, and then future Nick reveals like, oh yeah, this is just to make you learn not to betray us or whatever, and it was like this thing planned in advance. That was actually kind of cool. There's this one part where they shoot a guy directly in the face, and the bullet goes straight through his head. It's actually kind of violent. That scared me a little bit. There's this one part where a grenade is thrown in a room, and I don't know how grenades work in real life, but just going off of how movies are used, grenades are used in movies. You know how a lot of the time, it's like they pull the pin, they toss it, and it goes off, or they have like a few seconds. With this movie, it's kind of weird. There's like one scene, I think like one or two scenes of the grenade, but one of the scenes of the grenade, it's thrown in the room where Mike and Alice are, and they see the grenade and they're like, oh shit, it's a grenade. And Alice gets up and is able to pick the grenade and like bowls it, like with bowling, she like bowls it out of the room, and these other two people see it and they're like, oh shit. And Alice closes the door, and then the grenade goes off, and I'm like, that is way too long, I think, to respond to a grenade compared to like how grenades seem to work in other movies. That was kind of weird to me. let's see what else. I think what bothered me about the ending is they have a really nice scene where someone dies and then they immediately undo it, and all of the emotional weight of that death scene is just gone. I'm gonna go into specifics about that right now, but yeah, that's like my main point with it. So I thought if there was going to be a character that was going to die, I assumed it was going to be future Nick, because I was thinking throughout the movie of like, yeah, time travel exists in this movie and the time machine is gone, so there's no way they're just gonna let two Nicks live. One of them's probably gonna have to die, and I assumed it was gonna be future Nick, because then you know, like in the original timeline it was Mike that dies and, you know, Nick is alive, so I thought, okay, the future, they saved Mike, he's safe and everyone's still alive, and I thought, okay, so future Nick is probably going to have to die, and then the timeline is back to just there being one Nick. That's what I assumed. But no, instead what ends up happening is that present Mike ends up getting shot, and he actually doesn't die on the spot. They go to take him to the hospital. I'm so used to movies where it's like, we need to take this person to the hospital, is that they show them in the hospital, or they'd like die or something. Like, they never really get driven to the hospital. But in this movie, they get driven to the hospital. It's actually a really long scene, the hospital scene. At first I was like, why is the scene so long? Because it's them all singing in a car. I thought that scene was actually really well done, where it's like the four characters, they're singing in a car, Alice is driving, and the two Nicks are in the back, and they're trying to let present Nick sing so that, you know, they know that he's still alive, and focus on that, like, don't focus on dying. And then he kind of stops singing, and I really like how they all kind of just stare at each other like they know that he's like dying. And then they get to the hospital, and then it's the camera is in front of like the front of the car, and you're looking at like Mike and Alice, and then you see that one of the seats is empty because future Nick doesn't exist anymore, because present Nick is dead, and Alice is trying to justify it to herself and saying like, no, we can't be dead, we can just use the time machine, and Mike's like, no, we can't use the time machine is destroyed. And I thought, oh, okay, this is actually a nice way to wrap up the movie, because the whole thing with the plot and Mike dying in the original timeline, it's Nick's fault anyway, because he's the one that set up Mike as the rat. And even though he went back in time, or like his future self did, and he was able to save Mike, he still needs to pay the consequences for it, you know, for his original mistake. And I thought that was going to be like a great way to end it. And I thought that was nice of like, you know, Mike's trying to comfort Alice, and she's, you know, she doesn't want to believe that Nick is dead. And I thought, okay, that's going to be like a nice place for it to end. And then Alice is like, oh, you don't know? And Mike's like, what are you talking about? And then it turns out there's another time machine. There's been a second time machine this entire time that Alice knew about, because she's like best buddies with the guy that made the time machine. And it's like, what? You've known this whole time? So I guess if there was inevitably some kind of screw up, Alice could say, hey guys, we could just use time machine number 2. What? I mean, I don't know if I don't think Nick knew, because he kept trying to say like, yeah, no, the time machine's destroyed, it's fine. I think Alice was like the only one that knew, that was like still alive and everything. But that's wild. And you know, so then they go in the time machine. It doesn't show them actually going back and like, you know, saving Mike or whatever. The movie just ends with them using the time machine. But yeah, that's crazy, because they just had this whole like kind of long dramatic, and I thought really well done scene where, you know, Nick dies, and it wraps up everything with the story nicely and everything, and he like pays for his consequences and stuff. But no, they're just immediately like within the same scene of like, hey, there's another time machine, and they go to get the other time machine, and that's it. And it's like, the emotional weight of the death scene is gone, but also it doesn't matter. None of their mistakes matter because there was of the tension in the movie of like, yeah, our time machine is destroyed. Nick literally has a line of like, yeah, we only have one shot at this, and that creates some of the tension of like, yeah, they have the knowledge from the future, but they can't screw anything up because it's not like they can go back in time again. And so then the reveal of there being a second time machine just destroys all that, you know, like, what? No. So that annoyed me with the ending. I mean, I'm someone, don't get me wrong, I like happy endings. I like movies where everyone gets to live, but I feel like that just wasn't the way to do it, especially with like how the plot was going and how seriously they were treating that death scene. It gave like it's like the kind of equivalent to me of like when you're watching a kids movie, and I'm not saying this for every kids movie because this doesn't happen in every kids movies, but this tends to be the thing with kids movies where it's like a character dies and everybody gets sad, and like especially if it's like a really nice scene where they die and whatever, and then like 2 minutes later it's like, oh yeah, they're actually fine or whatever, and they're not dead, and the movie just kind of carries on from there and it ends, you know. And especially the ones where it's like, you know, that they're not gonna, there's no way they're gonna kill off this character, so you're waiting for like the little sad bit to be over. That's what this felt like. I mean, okay, I didn't know there was a second time machine. I didn't know what the ending of this movie was. I didn't know they were gonna have a way to revive Mike. That was a complete surprise to me. But this is kind of like the I guess like more mature movie like equivalent of that. Basically, that's what it kind of reminded me of. I mean, you know, except that I didn't know, but yeah, that was crazy for me when I watched this. The funny thing is, like, I wasn't gonna make a video in this, or well, I was maybe thinking about it because I was originally excited for this movie, and then I was watching it and I was like, oh, okay, there's not really much action, you know, I'm probably gonna finish it and then I'll watch something else because I'm gonna watch Madagascar 2 with my dad today, and then I got to this ending, and you know, the death scene was nice, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then the reveal of the second time machine, and I was like, okay, I have to talk about this movie now, you know, like that bothered me so much. I just kind of needed to let that out and tell you about it. But yeah, the movie ends there, and then something else too. I was watching the credits. The font for it, I don't know which font it was. It felt very like 90s / early 2000s. Just the look of. Oh, okay. I think I'm being summoned from Madagascar too. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on this. Bye.